You are standing on 4.5 acres of sovereign American territory in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Beneath your feet, two nuclear reactors are generating enough energy to power a city of 100,000 people. Above your head, 30-ton aircraft are snagging steel cables at 150 miles per hour. But if you look past the fighter jets and the radar arrays, you will find the true engine of this machine. It is found in the smell of jet fuel mixed with floor wax. It is found in the vibration of the steam pipes. And it is found in the 5,000 exhausted sailors who call the USS George Washington home. This is not a cruise ship. This is hull number 73, the Spirit of Freedom. For years, this ship held a unique distinction in the U.S. Navy as the only forward-deployed aircraft carrier based permanently in Yokosuka, Japan. It served as the tip of the spear in the Pacific. Then it spent 6 grueling years in a shipyard in Virginia being torn apart and put back together. Now it has returned to the sea. To understand the reality of the George Washington, you have to ignore the recruitment posters and look at the logistics. A carrier is a closed ecosystem. It is a floating city that must purify its own air, distill its own water, and manage its own waste, all while operating in some of the most hostile environments on Earth. The heartbeat of the ship is not the bridge, it is the galley. Feeding 5,000 people requires an industrial operation that rivals major food processing plants. The George Washington operates 24 hours a day. Therefore, the kitchen never closes. The culinary team, consisting of roughly 90 to 100 sailors, prepares 18,000 meals every single day. Let's look at the raw data of consumption. On a typical day at sea, the crew of the George Washington consumes 600 gallons of milk. They eat 4,000 pounds of chicken. They go through 800 loaves of bread, which must be baked fresh daily because there is simply no freezer space to store bread for a 6-month deployment. They crack 12,000 eggs. The logistics of getting this food on board is a tactical evolution known as a store's load. Unlike a restaurant that gets a delivery truck every morning, the George Washington must take on provisions at sea. A supply ship pulls alongside, steaming at 12 knots. The ships are separated by less than 50 yards. Pallets of food are transferred via cables or dropped by helicopters. This is an all-hands event. The food does not magically appear in the freezers. It must be moved by hand. Hundreds of sailors form a human chain, passing boxes of cereal, bags of flour, and crates of frozen beef down vertical ladders and through narrow passageways. They call it the Bucket Brigade. It is backbreaking manual labor that can last for 8 hours. Once the food is stored, the clock starts ticking. The George Washington faces the fresh food cliff. When the ship pulls out of port, morale is high. The salad bar has lettuce, cucumbers, and tomatoes. There are bananas and apples. But submarine and surface ship logistics dictate that fresh produce lasts about 14 days. By day 15, the salad bar disappears. It is replaced by canned peaches and bean salad. The milk switches from fresh cartons to UHT milk, ultra-high-temperature pasteurized milk that comes in a box and can sit on a shelf for months. It tastes slightly caramelized and is thicker than fresh milk. The eggs switch from shell eggs to liquid eggs in a carton and eventually to powdered eggs. Because the George Washington spent so many years based in Japan, its culinary culture is slightly different from the Atlantic Fleet. Rice is a staple. It is served at almost every meal, often in massive quantities. Curry is a common dish, adopted from the Japanese Navy traditions, but the universal currency of morale is the hamster. A hamster is a chicken cordon bleu. It is a processed square of chicken stuffed with ham and cheese, breaded and deep-fried. It is not healthy, it is not gourmet. But to a 19-year-old sailor who has just spent 14 hours on the flight deck in the freezing rain, a hot, greasy hamster is a comfort. The dining hierarchy is strict. The ship has multiple eating areas. The wardroom is for commissioned officers. They pay for their meals out of pocket, and in exchange they have tablecloths and stewards. The chief's mess is for senior enlisted sailors. It is known for having the best coffee and the best seasoned food on the ship. The vast majority of the crew eats on the enlisted mess decks. These are industrial cafeterias. You grab a plastic tray, you stand in line, you shout your order over the noise of the ventilation fans. You have about 15 minutes to eat before you have to return to your watch. But the most important meal on the George Washington is midrats, midnight rations. The ship runs on shifts. The night check crew maintains the aircraft and watches the radar while the rest of the ship sleeps. From 11:00 p.m. to midnight, the galley serves leftovers and breakfast food. It is a surreal scene. Sailors covered in grease and hydraulic fluid sitting under fluorescent lights, eating pancakes and corn dogs while the ship rocks gently in the swell. Living conditions on the George Washington are defined by a lack of space. The ship is 1,092 feet long, but every inch is claimed by machinery, weapons, or fuel. The crew lives in the leftovers. Enlisted sailors sleep in berthing compartments. These are large rooms packed with racks. A rack is an aluminum pan, roughly 6 feet long and 28 inches wide. They are stacked 3 high. If you are in the middle rack, you cannot sit up. You cannot roll over quickly. You have a small reading light and a privacy curtain. The privacy curtain is the only barrier between you and 80 other people. Behind that curtain, sailors tape up pictures of their families. They read books. They watch movies on their phones. It is a tiny capsule of personal space in a public world. The noise in the berthing compartments is relentless. If your berthing is located under the arresting gear, every time a jet lands, it sounds like a car crash on the roof. The cable pulls out, the hydraulic engine screams, and the deck plate shudders. This happens every 60 seconds during flight operations. You do not sleep through it. You learn to sleep between the crashes. Hygiene is a logistical challenge. The George Washington has desalination plants that boil seawater to create fresh water. It can produce 400,000 gallons a day. However, the priority for fresh water is the nuclear reactor and the steam catapults. The crew gets what is left. Showers are communal. There are no dividers. The water pressure fluctuates. The Navy shower is mandatory. Water on to wet down, water off to soap up, water on to rinse. Long showers are socially unacceptable because they drain the hot water tank for the sailors waiting in line behind you. One of the most defining events in the history of the USS George Washington, and a lesson in the fragility of life aboard, occurred on May 22, 2008. It was not a battle. It was a cigarette. While the ship was in the Pacific, unauthorized smoking in a room near the auxiliary boiler exhaust led to a fire. The fire spread into the ventilation system and moved down 8 decks. It burned for 12 hours. It threatened the ship's main spaces. 80 sailors were injured. It was one of the most serious non-combat fires in modern naval history. It changed the culture of the ship. Every sailor on board today knows that damage control is not just a drill. They know that a single spark can turn the floating city into a trap. The scars of that fire led to rigorous new training standards that define the daily routine of the current crew. But perhaps the most difficult period for the George Washington was not at sea but in the shipyard. From 2017 to 2023, the ship underwent RCOH refueling and complex overhaul. This happens once in a carrier's 50-year life. The ship was taken into a dry dock in Virginia. The nuclear fuel was replaced. The systems were gutted. Life for the crew during this period was psychologically grueling. A ship in dry dock is a construction zone. There is no air conditioning. The toilets often don't work. The noise of jackhammers is constant 24 hours a day. For the sailors living on board during the overhaul, the sense of purpose vanished. They weren't sailing, they were living in a construction site. The commute from the parking lot to the ship could take an hour. The living conditions deteriorated. This period highlighted the mental health crisis that can afflict a crew when the mission is unclear. It is a stark reminder that the hardest part of Navy life isn't always the combat. Sometimes it is the grind of maintenance. Now that the George Washington is back at sea, the rhythm has returned. The ship operates on an 18-hour cycle for flight operations, but a 24-hour cycle for life. Let's talk about the blue-tiled jungle. The interior floors of the ship are covered in blue vinyl tiles. There are miles of them. Maintaining these floors is the primary job of the darkest junior sailors. Every night, sweepers are called. Sailors with brooms and mops clean the passageways. Then they wax and buff the floors until they shine. It seems trivial, but on a warship, cleanliness is discipline. A dirty ship is a dangerous ship. Waste management is another hidden reality. 5,000 people generate a massive amount of trash. You cannot simply throw plastic into the ocean. It is strictly forbidden. The ship has a dedicated waste processing room. Plastic waste is collected, shredded, and melted down into solid discs called pucks. These pucks are sealed in odor-proof bags and stored on the ship until it pulls into port. On a long deployment, the ship might carry thousands of these plastic discs. Paper and metal are processed and can be discharged overboard, but only in specific international zones. Food waste is pulped into a liquid slurry and pumped out, feeding the fish in the ship's wake. The social structure of the George Washington is built around the division. This is your work center. You might be in V1 division, flight deck, or engineering or supply. These are the people you work with, eat with, and sleep near. The camaraderie is forced by proximity. You know your shipmates' habits, you know who snores, you know who gets seasick, you know who is having trouble with their spouse back home. There are no secrets on a carrier. The communication with the outside world is controlled. The ship has internet, but it is slow and bandwidth is limited. It is shared by 5,000 people. Operational security controls the flow of information. When the ship enters River City, a condition of radio silence, all off-ship communication is cut. The internet goes dark, the phones stop working. This happens when the ship is conducting sensitive operations or if there is a casualty on board. For the crew, it is a sudden, jarring isolation. You might be mid-conversation with your family via email and then silence. You do not know when the line will open again. It could be hours. It could be days. Despite the hardships, the ship tries to maintain morale. There are gyms on board tucked into unused spaces. They are hot, smell of sweat and rust, and are always crowded. Lifting weights is the primary stress reliever for the crew. There is a library. There are movie nights in the hangar bay where a sheet is hung between two fighter jets and a projector plays a film. And then there is the Steel Beach Picnic. This is a rare event where the captain shuts down flight operations. The aircraft are moved to the bow. The flight deck, usually the most dangerous place on Earth, becomes a park. The culinary team hauls massive charcoal grills up 5 flights of stairs to the roof. They grill burgers and hot dogs. The crew wears shorts and t-shirts. They play cornhole. They sit on the edge of the ship, legs dangling over the catwalks, watching the sunset over the open ocean. It is a moment of surreal peace. You are eating a burger on top of a nuclear reactor, surrounded by stealth fighters in the middle of nowhere. But the work always returns. The flight deck of the George Washington is a ballet of lethal force. It is categorized by the color of the jerseys the sailors wear. Purple shirts handle the fuel. They drag heavy hoses across the deck, pumping JP-5 jet fuel into running aircraft. Red shirts are the ordnance team. They load the bombs and missiles. They physically lift 500-pound warheads and attach them to the wings. Green shirts are the mechanics. They maintain the catapults and arresting gear. They dive under the aircraft to check hydraulics. Yellow shirts are the directors. They control the flow. A 19-year-old yellow shirt has the authority to stop a commander taxiing a $60 million aircraft. The temperature on the flight deck can reach 120 degrees. The jet exhaust adds to the heat. The non-skid surface is like sandpaper. If you fall, it shreds your uniform and your skin. The noise is physical. It vibrates in your chest. You communicate with hand signals because speaking is impossible. One of the most dangerous jobs belongs to the shooter. This officer stands on the deck and gives the final signal to launch. They must calculate the weight of the aircraft, the wind speed, and the steam pressure. If they get the math wrong, the jet will be too slow and fall into the ocean, a cold cat. If they use too much pressure, they can rip the nose gear off the plane. Down below the waterline, the snipes, the engineers, live in a different world. They rarely see the sun. They work in the engineering spaces where the temperature can exceed 110 degrees. They monitor the steam gauges. They maintain the evaporators that make the water. They are the ones who fix the toilets when the vacuum system clogs. They are covered in grease and sweat, and they pride themselves on being the hardest workers on the ship. The George Washington is currently back in the fleet, operating with the newest aircraft, including the F-35C Lightning II. This brings new challenges. The F-35 is a flying computer. It requires different maintenance, different security, and different logistics than the older F-18s. The ship has had to adapt. The workspaces are upgraded. The internet backbone is stronger. But the human element remains unchanged. The technology advances, but the sailor still sleeps in a coffin rack. They still eat powdered eggs. They still miss their families. When the George Washington returns to port, the event is marked by the manning of the rails. Sailors stand along the edge of the flight deck in their dress blues. It is a majestic sight for the news cameras. But if you look closely at their faces, you see the exhaustion. You see the weight of the deployment. They are scanning the pier, looking for their families. They are dreaming of a bed that doesn't move. They are dreaming of a shower with endless hot water. They are dreaming of silence. The USS George Washington is more than a weapons system. It is a testament to human endurance. It is a machine that turns calories, caffeine, and discipline into air power. It functions because 5,000 people agree to wake up every day, put on a uniform, and do a job that is dangerous, dirty, and demanding. They trade their privacy for the mission. They trade their comfort for the safety of the ship. And they do it all while floating on a steel island, thousands of miles from home, surviving on hamsters and the hope of the next port call. This is the reality of hull number 73, the spirit of freedom.